Before we begin, I want to quickly explain a small but important change to how this podcast works. Up until now, many of you will know that 1 in 3 episodes sat behind a paywall. I'm moving away from that model. From now on, the first half of every main podcast episode will be free for everyone. These conversations remain open and accessible, and that's important to me. For those who choose to support the show, the second half of each episode will be reserved for paid supporters. This is where the conversation often deepens, and it now includes a live interactive segment where supporters can ask questions of my guests and of me. If you value this work and want access to the full conversation, the ability to ask questions, and to join our private Telegram community, please consider becoming a supporter. Your support keeps this podcast independent, uncaptured, and alive, and sponsor and ad-free. Welcome to the Doc Malik Honest Health Podcast. This is where we have real conversations about health, politics, economics, and the world around us. Conversations you probably will not hear anywhere else. This podcast exists because of listeners like you. It is independent, reader and listener supported, which means no corporate sponsors, no pharmaceutical advertising, and no editorial interference. If you value honest conversations and want to support this work, the best way is to subscribe via Substack or Spotify. You can also make a one-off donation to my Buy Me a Coffee. And if you're looking for personalized guidance or clarity around your own health journey, you want a second opinion, or get some questions answered, then please book a consultation with me. I'd love to help. Visit docmalik.com. Okay, now let's begin.
You are listening to the Doc Malik podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or his Substack. Or simply buy him a coffee with a one-off donation, links to which can be found at docmalik.com. Now, let's get on with the show.
Boop, boop. Right, here we go. Debbie, listen, thanks. Thank you so much, first of all, for sending me your book, The Deep State Business. Man, that's heavy reading. I'm going to start off by asking you, can we please do this in 2 parts? I would love to have you back, and at the end, let's fix a date in the next 4 to 5 weeks, because I think there's too much to talk about here. There's, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to talk about chapters 1, 2, and 3-ish in this episode, and then maybe 4, 5 in the second episode, because there's just too much to cover. I mean, to be honest, you could probably pack in 4 or 5 podcasts. I don't mind, actually, if that's all right. But there's just a lot of information. And the thing is, my way of looking at things is always saying to people, especially when they want to promote their book, is like, look, the more you give information out, the more likely someone's going to buy the book. Like, don't be worried about going through the details, because some people just want to skim over it, and then people don't really get invested. And the more you give, the more you will receive. So if you can really get into the book, that'd be great. But starting off, there's a couple of things. Like, for example, the foreword, Jeffrey Tucker from Brownstone Institute. You just wonder why that guy, that Indian guy, whatever his name is, why did he ring? Rajiv. Why did he ring Jeffrey Tucker? And how did he know these vaccines were going to come very quick? I mean, that's in the foreword. You could easily just skim it. But that, to me, is a bombshell, right? Number 1. And then number 2, you talk about in chapter 1, the global biodefense, public partnership, military industrial complex business. We need to go into that. But what's really important is 9/11, 2001 wasn't just the war on terror and, the Iraq war and Afghan war and Osama bin Laden. It was those anthrax letters, which were so bizarre at the time. And you're like, what? And it's been proven that that anthrax came from the U.S. Army biodefense laboratories, and they pinned it on a guy called Ivan, who happened to die of suicide in 2008 before inverted commas, suicided before the court case even started. And now the reason why this is relevant, Debbie, I just want to quickly tell you something is, I'm telling you, I've been a doctor 25, 26 years. I know all about paracetamol overdose. I've seen it when I was working in ER. People who overdose on acetaminophen, was it you guys call it in America? Tylenol, yeah? But we call it paracetamol. Tylenol, paracetamol. No one who knows how to really die chooses to die with a Tylenol overdose. One, it's very difficult to do that. So, two, they can put charcoal and make you vomit and, try and absorb it and get rid of it. Three, if you are successful, it is the most painful way of dying ever. Like, it's slow, it's agonizing, it's not nice. Like, so if you've got even 2 brain cells together and you want to kill yourself, that is not the number 1 choice. It's not number 2, 3, 4, or 5 choice of how you want to kill yourself. So how's this guy who's supposedly a scientist, laboratory, PhD, whatever, smart cookie guy, choosing to kill himself with acetaminophen, paracetamol? And the funny thing is, when they found him, apparently he was unconscious. Now, I can tell you right now, people who overdose on paracetamol are very rarely unconscious. And maybe if they've taken alcohol and something else, they might be unconscious, but they're not unresponsive. So to me, I ran this by my wife. She's a doctor as well. I was like, what do you think of this? She was like, that's a little rubbish. I was like, yeah, right. So, the fact they found this person unresponsive, unconscious, and then he died of acute liver failure, and then 3 days later he's dead, the whole thing stinks. That guy didn't kill himself. Like, that's proper deep state CIA bullshit going on there. Anyway, I wanted to get that off my chest. The mic is over to you now.
Thank you, Dr. Malik. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here. I admire your work. You are one of the few people that I can listen to and not feel like my brain is being polluted with lies and propaganda. And that is really very, very rare. So thank you. I'm so happy that you said what you said about Ivans. And the reason I'm happy that you opened with that, even though it's so random, is that I've been having a discussion about that with someone who is supposed to be on our side and who claims that he committed suicide. And I said, exactly, my husband is a doctor, so I have the same exact experience as you. I looked at it and I said, that doesn't make any sense. And then I asked my husband, he said, no, you can't commit suicide, or it's extremely difficult to commit suicide on what we call Tylenol, because it doesn't happen right away. It takes a few days. They can purge, they can get it out of your system. And then this person tried to claim that it was Tylenol PM, which is like a Tylenol plus sleeping pills or more sleeping medicine. I haven't done this yet, Doc Malik, and it's just such a coincidence.
It's Malik, by the way, Malik.
Malik, I'm so sorry. I call you Malik. Dr. Malik. I was about to look up, when did they come out with Tylenol PM? Because I don't even know if they had it then, if it was a thing. And so the whole claim, whenever I hear anybody who claims that Ivans committed suicide, who claims to be on our side or an insider or knowing anything about the biowarfare industrial complex, I know something's wrong when that person goes along with that narrative, because that narrative is so ridiculous and so fishy.
So ridiculous. It's
totally
Trump got shot and his ear got cut and he just suddenly magically healed. And I'm not saying these people are deliberately malicious and misleading. I just think there's a lot of stupid people out there. And by that, I don't mean like low IQ or anything. No, I just mean that they get captured by their own ideology, mind control, programming. They invest their belief system in this cult figure or cult ideology, and then it's just too difficult to backtrack. You dig yourself a hole, you climb in, you don't want to climb out, so
that's kind of you, because I attribute it sometimes to that. Many people are in that camp, but I also have become a very paranoid person, and so I tend to do background searches on people now and figure out where they came from, what their previous positions were, what they were saying, and what they're claiming now. And a lot of times I see that I conclude from my research that they are being paid or hired or, coerced in some cases to be gatekeepers. And so I don't know if you're familiar with the three camps that, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm going to blank
Take your
out on
time.
his name.
No, take your time. But while you're thinking about that, I'm going to, listen, I'm like you. Look, I was doing some cleaning today because I had a friend over yesterday. And before we started the podcast, she was looking at the bookshelves behind me and going, oh, no, this is a complete mess. You need to organize everything. Oh my God, put them in color scheme and this and that. And you know what? Fair dues. And she said, look, a cluttered space will be a cluttered mind. You need to clear everything out so things can come to you. And I was like, okay. So I went into her house and we've got a massive bookshelf and it's a mess, right? There's kids stuff there, kids toys, Lego, pictures from 3 years ago. So I went through this massive purge this morning. I was cleaning. I felt like 5 black bags, 2 boxes, recycle stuff, books to give away to the charity shop. Felt really great about it. Okay. But in amongst all the books, I found cards like from 5, 6, 7 years ago where people have said, hey, thanks, Doc Malik. You saved my life. Literally saved my life. Thanks, Doc Malik. You know, it was the best operation ever. You're a brilliant surgeon. And it was so nice to see that. It was so nice to see that. And it was reminding me of my past life. And I've put it on my Instagram if anybody doesn't believe me, or my Substack. I've posted it on notes. And that was my background. Now, the thing is, I'm like you. Like, I thought in the world of orthopedic surgery, it was cutthroat, type A personality, narcissist, backstabbing going on, competitiveness, private practice. You leave that world and you come into this world. Man, this has been an eye opener. Whoa. Like people I've realized have got different personas. Like what they project when you actually have a chat with them on the phone or like a private little, they're very different. They're not the same. And it's not nice. There's a lot of ego. There's a lot of arrogance. There's a lot of hubris. There is a lot of gatekeeping going on and misdirection. And it's got really exhausting for me. Just being like, what the heck? So I've been like, yeah, I have actually been quite wary, and I don't get that many people on now who my alarm bells go off. Now, in the past, I was like, no, we should give them a platform and it gives them an opportunity to out themselves. But you know what? I just find their energy so draining and so exhausting, and I don't want to give them any more airtime than they already get. Does that make sense? So I've moved on. So I'm in agreement with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been, I've gone through just a very turbulent emotional journey over this, because I started out being a very, very traditional, very stereotypical liberal Democrat, and in the United States, I would be reading the New York Times and listening to NPR, which is National Public Radio, like the BBC. And I believed everything. I believed it. I believed the whole thing. I was, I hated Trump, which I still do. But, I I was very partisan at the time, and I'm no longer partisan at all. I think partisanship is a psyop. So I woke up with COVID, and I, for a year and a half, just struggled locally to try to fight all all of the crazy stuff that was going on. Didn't work. So I was trying to write. Nobody would publish anything. Finally, the Brownstone Institute, which is Jeffrey Tucker, as you mentioned, they published my book and he wrote the foreword to it. They started publishing what I wrote, and that encouraged me to actually start investigating what actually happened. And that's how I came to, uncover all the things that I did and had to write all the articles that became the book. And I thought, okay, well, all these people at Brownstone and in the medical freedom movement and the people who are opposing COVID, they understand. They understand like me. They woke up. They understand that the parties are fake, that partisanship is a psyop, that we're outside of that system, and that we need to operate outside of that system in order to, first of all, in order to preserve humanity, in order to preserve our sanity, in order to work towards something better, right? And that we're not going to get sucked into the psyop anymore. And then they all got sucked into the psyop again. And
Which
I
one?
had a
Which one? There's so
the
many.
Trump Maha. Well, in the United States, it's the Trump Maha psyop.
Yeah.
So that's so all my people, the people that I worked with through COVID, and not all of them, there's a few who still are outside, but you know, at the Brownstone Institute and in terms of people who were in the medical, so-called supporters of RFK Jr., they all fell for the new psyop, which is now Trump is our savior. And now we have friends in government. I thought we all understood the public-private partnership. That didn't go away. That doesn't go away depending on who is in charge. Doesn't change. You know, Trump was in charge. He started everything. He started COVID. He's in charge of warp speed. I mean, he wasn't ever in charge really, but he was the front man for it. And now we think that he's our savior. I just can't understand it, Doc Malik. I cannot understand it. And so I had a nervous breakdown.
5D chess. 5D chess.
5D chess. Yeah. We see where that's got us, the 5D chess, right? And so what happened was I was writing articles around the election, around the time of the election in the United States, where I was doing the same thing that I did during COVID. I was taking people who said that they were doing something like that they were public health experts, but actually they were biowarfare, experts and operatives, right? So I uncovered a lot of that during COVID. And then running up to the election, I uncovered the people who said that they were freedom fighters and that they were health freedom people, and I uncovered that they were actually part of the machine, that they came from places that were absolutely not health freedom, that they were actually part of the public-private partnership that ran COVID and that was going to run the psyops forever and ever. And yet, when I tried to publish those stories, I got slammed by the people who celebrated my discoveries during COVID. So they celebrated when I said, "Oh, Deborah Birx, who was the lead of the United States government's, COVID task force, but she actually came from the biosecurity side of things, not from public health. She was not a public health person at all." Everybody's like, "Oh, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, there's this horrible, deep state public-private partnership, and there's all these people who are pretending to be public health officials, but they're not." And then I said, okay, and now there's these other people who are pretending to be health freedom fighters, but they're not. They're coming from the same place as Deborah Birx, maybe not the bio warfare, but definitely the deep state. And they canceled me, basically. And so I got canceled by the whole left, all my previous friends and colleagues and whatever. I was doing art, and the art world definitely was not on my side during COVID. And then I lost my whole other support network, which I thought that we were together. I thought we understood what was going on, and I lost that again. And so now I feel like I'm just floating in the void of the few people like you, like my friend and colleague Sasha Latipova, who I know you've had on your show and who who actually introduced us. So I'm grateful for that. And she, and so the few of us who are just kind of hanging out here floating in what's zone 3. So I'm going to tell you about the 3 zones, and then I'm going to try to remember. I'm so annoyed that I can't remember, because it's a really fantastic British writer on Substack an intellectual who wrote a book about COVID and propaganda, and I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. I love him. Anyway, he has a very, very good description of how propaganda works. And he describes 3 camps. Camp 1 is just the surface. It's where people live who are like me when I used to read the New York Times, listen to, public radio. You just believe what you're told by the media. Camp 3 is where you and I and Sasha and a few other people are. It's like when you realize that that's all lies and propaganda, and you no longer believe any of that. and you understand that partisanship is a psyop, and most of the things that you're being told are manipulations to make you feel a certain way, to make you behave a certain way in order to cover up what's actually going on. That's camp 3. Camp 2 is the problem. So camp 2 is where all the gatekeepers are stationed so that people who wake up in camp 1, like all of our friends during COVID, and say, oh, wait a minute, something bad is happening here. They get stuck in camp 2 because that's where all the secondary and more pernicious and more insidious psyops are happening. It's like all the limited hangouts, like, yeah, COVID was bad, but now Trump is da da da, now, but Elon Musk, he did the Twitter files. X is now a free speech platform, so that's camp 2. And camp 2 is where they catch everyone and prevent them from actually waking up and getting to camp 3.
100%.
And so I feel like now most people are in camp 2 now who I used to be more closely affiliated with. And so I don't have a lot of people left here in camp 3. So I appreciate you being here in camp 3 with me.
Well, I appreciate you too. And I think those who are in camp 3 are truly on team humanity. Like that,
yes.
That's the definition. You are team humanity. Yes. You're not on
team
Trump.
Humanity.
You're not on team Trump. You're not on team Reform Party, team Labor, team Democrat. You're not team Christian. You're not team Jew. You're not team Zionism. You're not team any freaking anything. You are team humanity. And that's
team humanity.
So rare. And listen, it was the same over here, right? So you think you're alone. You think like no one's like you. And then you start getting all this information drip coming to you. You start discovering new platforms and you start like Telegram and this and that, and information starts coming. You're like, oh my God, I'm not alone. There's other people that think like me. Then you connect with them, then you speak to them, then sometimes you even meet with them and they're like, you know what? We don't trust the media. The media lies. The BBC lies. CNN lies. The government lies. They're liars. The journalists can't be trusted. The authorities can't be trusted. COVID was a hoax. And you're like, I love you guys. And then the Ukraine war comes and it's like, Putin's bad. Putin's a dictator. Oh my God. Have you seen what the news has said about him? And you're like, what? And they're like, and we need to give more arms to the Ukrainians. You're like, you're supporting the military industrial complex now? You trust the media and you believe in the government? Like, what happened to you? And it's like, I don't understand. It's like, who's taken over their bodies? Like, they were completely anti all of this before when it was related to COVID. Then Ukraine-Russia war comes along and they're just establishment figures. And then October 7th comes along and it's like, Hamas, they're evil. And I'm like, hold on 1 second. Israel was the test bed for COVID. That Netanyahu injected his population. They had the worst mandates and the most draconian laws. He treated his population like scum. He was a tyrant. They had the worst COVID measures. They don't care about their people. And it's like, no, we now believe in Netanyahu. I'm like, did you know leading up to October 7th, half the population was on the street, like demanding that the government be overthrown? Like there was almost civil war in Israel. Like, but no, now the media is saying this. Now it's all bad Hamas. And it's like, now we're supporting a genocide and it's all okay. And you believe everything the media tells you. And, people like Max Blumenthal have done great work, Jewish guy who's exposed the military industrial complex, the censorship industrial complex. And now they're all liars. These people, the governments of all these countries don't give a damn about their people, no matter what religion or race or faith or anything. But the problem is, it doesn't matter. And then you got the Trump psyop, then you got the Elon Musk psyop, then you got the Nigel Farage psyop. Then it's like, oh no, we need to vote for reform. Oh no, we need to trust him. And you go, well, what about the fact that Larry Ellison was in, the White House on day 2, pushing 500 billions for mRNA tech? And it's like, can't talk about that. How about the fact that Reform Party's now got a bunch of ex-Tory ministers who are pushing the COVID shot? How can you support that? Well, it's better than the other option. And that's one thing I hear. Or, well, what do you recommend? And it's like, how about we don't play? Like, sometimes the way you win is not to play because the game is rigged. So don't play. Like, but the problem is they're in their cult and they're in their little team mindset. They don't have the brain capacity to think bigger than that. And they're captured by this ideology. And then we're stuck. Anyway, I need to shut up. You need to talk. Please, can you talk about then the formation of this bio-industrial complex and And man, because it's been going on for quite a long time, like literally 2001, decades.
Yeah. I just want to say the name of the person that I couldn't remember before is David Hughes. Do you know David Hughes?
I do know David Hughes. Excellent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he's fantastic and really smart. And so he's the one who came up with the 3 camps idea. I just want to give him credit for that. He has a lot of really good ways of framing what's happening. Another really good frame that he has is transnational class relations, because that's what's happening right now. It's transnational and it's all about class. Has nothing to do with, political parties or ideologies or anything like that. Okay, so as far as the biodefense industrial complex, interestingly, I am currently researching polio. I didn't think I was going to. That wasn't something that I was interested in. But Sasha Latipova was doing some research on something, and she asked me to help her find some articles about the people who first so-called isolated the polio virus in the 1930s and 40s. Apparently, they even did it before that. So I started looking into it, and surprise, surprise, the people who are credited with isolating the strain of polio, and I say all of these words in quotes because all of them I think are scientifically misleading, but they claim that they isolated the strain of polio called the Mahoney strain, which is the key strain that is used in vaccines, and it is used as sort of like the standard for polio. And I looked into who those people were, and one of them in 1941 became in charge of the United States Army's flu, influenza, and other infectious disease programs. So he became part of the military industrial complex in 1941. And the other guy is a mystery man who you can't find any information about anywhere, who worked at a university in Michigan for like 30 or 40 years and only published like 10 papers. And we did some more digging, Sasha and I, and found out that he was definitively and self-admittedly hired to do work for the bioweapons program that FDR started during World War II. So the bioweapons program started at least in 1940, 1941. That's when we have a paper trail of it starting in the United States. In other countries, in Japan, in Europe, in Germany, it started before that. And bioweapons were used by different countries on different populations. But in the United States, it started during World War II. FDR commissioned a new program, which was the bioweapons program. And one of the guys in that program is one of the guys who isolated the key strain of polio. So polio then becomes not that they were using polio as a bioweapon, but the polio program, which basically the program was this. They took a disease that wasn't hurting or killing anyone, but that had a very visually compelling effect on a very small number of people. So like kids had to be in braces. They put people in iron lungs and paraded them around the world to show how awful it was. But it had really no impact on anybody. And they used those visuals to create enormous panic, and that might sound familiar, over something that wasn't killing or hurting anyone. That might sound familiar. And then they used that to raise enormous amounts of money to start treatment and treatment programs, which is great. I mean, they treated paralyzed kids and they helped a lot of people. That was the public side of it. And they also started looking at vaccines, which they claimed they were doing through a private foundation, but clearly they were also doing it through the bioweapons program and the military industrial complex. So polio is a really good kind of precursor for COVID and for every other infectious disease panic that they've ever done. Right? So they take something that's not hurting anybody, but they make a huge deal out of it. It's mostly about the propaganda and the public relations. And they make everybody terrified, and then governments have to get involved, and the pharmaceutical industry has to get involved, and all of the research institutions have to get involved, and all the scientists have to get involved. Now, it's really interesting because already in the 1940s, I discovered just now through this polio research, when they started the bioweapons program, I think it was like 3,000 scientists already got, how many people are working on infectious disease? It's like everyone who's working on infectious disease at all the major research institutions in the United States all of a sudden becomes part of the bioweapons program. So they are no longer doing research that's just basic science or that is public health oriented. They are now doing research that is related to biowarfare and biodefense. And so starting in the 40s, and I think ever since then, everything that's ever been done in that arena has been controlled. The funding and the agenda has been set by the biowarfare industrial complex. So then we can fast forward to anthrax, which, as you said, clearly came from a United States, biowarfare research facility.
I just want to pause for a moment because conversations like this are exactly why I started this podcast, to explore ideas openly, without censorship or corporate filters. If you're finding value in these conversations, becoming a subscriber is the best way to support independent work like this and help it grow. And many listeners eventually realize they want to go deeper and apply these ideas to their own lives. That is where my consultation service comes in. It's a space where we can explore your situation one-to-one and bring clarity to what can feel often very overwhelming. It's extremely difficult to navigate the healthcare system. So if this resonates, you can find everything you want at docmalik.com. Also, if you've got a moment, check out my affiliate page there. Right, let's get back into this conversation.
Go ahead.
Sorry, can I quickly just go back to polio?
Mm-hmm.
So, that, like you said, that is the big one they talk about when it comes to vaccines, vaccine efficacy. But look, we cured polio. Even my dad talked about it. Oh, polio is a terrible disease in India and everything. And I've met people who've had polio. One skinny little leg, and he was in the finals for our orthopedic surgery exams. What is this diagnosis? Blah blah blah. What can their problems be? So it's real that people end up with this kind of neurological problem. The question is, what does actually cause it? Some people think it's toxin like DDT. Some people say it's the virus. Some people say it could be both. Some people say it's never really gone away. It's just been given a different name, Guillain-Barré syndrome or whatever. What do you think about what is going on about polio before we move on?
Oh, good. Yeah, that's a good question. So polio is a myth, as defined at the story that there is a distinct clinical entity called poliomyelitis, and that distinct clinical entity can be separated from other clinical entities, particularly acute, now I'm going to forget the name of it, acute
transverse myelitis, encephalitis, or something like that.
All of those things. But there's another one that's that they used in order to screen for polio. And basically, clinically, you can't differentiate polio from a whole bunch of other things. So polio, poliomyelitis is a definition that doesn't have a clinical, it doesn't have a clinical description that's different from a lot of other things. And so therefore, if in the early 1900s, when they just called any childhood paralysis, which they of course then said, oh yeah, it's just children. It was called infantile paralysis, actually.
Acute flaccid paralysis.
Acute flaccid. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, exactly. Acute flaccid paralysis. That's exactly it. It is hilarious, Doc Malik, because now I'll rewind. So all the way back then, when they started identifying it as an epidemic, which was completely weird and bizarre and didn't make any sense, they said, oh, there are these outbreaks They didn't start happening until, the 19th century, when they described some places where some kids were getting paralyzed in the same place at the same time. That's it. That's how they described the epidemic. Some kids were getting paralyzed or were having some neurological issues in the same place at the same time. Therefore, they concluded in the 20th century, oh, well, it must be a contagious disease, even though they couldn't define the disease separate from a million other things. They had no idea what was causing the disease, or it's not even a disease, it's just a condition. They said, oh, it's so strange that it's not happening. It's only happening in the Western world, in places that are very clean and where there's a lot of hygiene. It's not happening in places where people are, have sewage flowing and have bad hygiene and contaminated food. Isn't that strange? Never were able to explain that. And then all of a sudden, when they claimed to have eliminated it in the West, they decided that it was happening in all these contaminated places where people have bad hygiene and bad food, even though they described it initially as being the opposite of that. Everything that they initially described as being polio, they then turned around and decided that it was exactly the opposite once they had supposedly eliminated it. And so the condition polio doesn't exist as a separate clinical entity. Okay, then what causes it? If it's not a separate clinical entity, then all of the tests that they did in the 20s and 30s, where what they did was, it's really, when I read it, I was not expecting to find this, Doc Malik. I mean, I've heard everybody, argue about viruses, no viruses, and I don't even argue about that. I actually think there are viruses, and I think that they can cause problems. But the way that they did the research back then is just unbelievable. So they would take somebody who had some kind of paralysis, or even somebody who just lived in the same household, and they would take something, let's say fecal material from that person, and then they would run it through. So here's how they discovered that polio, a non-specific condition, is caused by a virus. They ran the fecal matter of somebody who either had it or was in the same place as people who had it through filters that they said were filtering out everything the size of a bacterium. So they knew about bacteria, and they said, okay, is it a bacterium? We want to know. And they said, okay, we're going to filter out everything that could possibly be a bacteria. So they filtered the poop through this filter. They got some sludge remaining at the end that supposedly didn't have any bacteria in it. And they said, okay, this sludge let's see if this sludge contains something that makes somebody paralyzed. So they took it and they fed it to monkeys. And the monkeys didn't get sick. Nothing happened. So then they said, okay, well, obviously we have to inject it right into the brains of the monkeys because this is a neurological condition. So we can't actually try to infect them the way a human might get infected, or we actually don't know. They didn't know. They were like, we don't know. How does it get? They still don't know. Is it oral? Is it nasal? Is it, how do you get polio? They didn't know. They did not know. And so they started injecting it right into the spinal cords and brains of monkeys. And lo and behold, when you inject sludge into the brains of monkeys, they die sometimes, and sometimes they get paralyzed, and sometimes, I mean, it's just, you cannot believe what the story of polio is based on. So when you see that, and you hear people saying, but polio, like when you say, well, vaccines don't work, and they say, but polio, now I understand what but polio means. But polio is a myth. It's a fiction. It's a complete and utter fiction. Okay, so they were injecting this poop sludge into monkey brains, and then the monkeys who were paralyzed by it, then they would take stuff from their brains and mash it up and mix it with formaldehyde and other things in order to so-called neutralize the virus. And then
Can
they
you
would
read
inject
that?
that.
What
does it say? No, I can't read it. Your picture on my screen is a little bit fuzzy, so I can't read what
this book says the basic laws of human stupidity.
Oh, yeah. I've heard you mention that.
This book is amazing. Never underestimate the number of stupid people in this world, or the capacity of stupid people to do stupid things. Never, ever underestimate it. Anyway, I've heard all this stuff before. I'm like you. I kind of believe that there are these things called viruses or whatever. I just don't believe that they cause the degree of problems that we're told. I don't believe that they cause contagion the way we're described. And I don't believe they're toxic and lethal like we're told. I kind of sit between terrain and germ, and I think there might be something else completely entirely as well that we just don't know about. I'm keeping a very open mind. But yeah, I've read about all these things where they take gloop and brain and squish something into their spine. I mean, if you did that to me, I'm sure I would get really unwell if you injected poop sludge into my spine. And then you end up feeding the brains to someone else and then hope. I mean, what? This is science. Trust the science.
Yes, and even and I was talking to my husband about it, about the descriptions that they have of how they did things. You know, back then the way that they prepared things and injected things. I mean, they didn't have the stuff that we have now, the sterilization and my husband said if you inject anything except for saline into like very sterile saline, and even then. It can be dangerous to inject anything into the spinal cord, but anything other than just sterile saline, you're going to have problems. It doesn't matter what it is. And so they keep injecting it.
I was going to say there's a blood-brain barrier for a reason.
Yeah.
To protect that space.
And that's not how, and if there are viruses, which I do think there are, and I think viruses can cause illness, that's, so far I haven't seen anything that convinces me otherwise, but I'm keeping an open mind. But even if there are, they're not injected into our brains with a bunch of formaldehyde and other chemicals and other garbage and other contaminants. And so so that's how the story of polio is based on a disease that is not specific, a cause that cannot be determined, and a solution. So you're a solution to a problem that's non-specific and a cause that's not determined. How is that solution actually supposed to work? So the vaccine for polio, right, which is supposedly made from the sludge stuff, where they supposedly isolated these strains, and then they go into all the different strains. There's a whole crazy story about the different strains of polio that makes absolutely no sense. And then the minute that in the 1950s, when they went on this big campaign to inject everybody, the second that happened, supposedly, that's it. So they went from having, now again, the numbers are minuscule. They are minuscule. So let's say at the very, very height of the worst epidemic in the 1950s, or the late 1940s, early 1950s, and surprisingly, Doc Malik, all of the epidemics, the worst ones for polio happened in the United States and other countries where they were working on vaccines exactly at the same time. I don't know why. Why were there no epidemics of polio before, like big ones? You know, suddenly it became like a common thing right when they were working on the vaccine. I don't know why. It's a coincidence. And so they, the minute that the height of it, I think the worst epidemic, I think there were 57,000 cases. Again, now cases, we know, is an interesting term that can be used in all different kinds of ways. And so we have no idea what they meant by cases of polio, because when they describe polio, they say most people who get it are fine. Most people don't even get any symptoms. Some people get like a flu-like symptoms. Does that sound familiar? Some people, get minor neurologic symptoms or paralysis that goes away. A tiny number of people get paralysis that doesn't go away, and a minuscule number of people die. So at the height of the worst epidemic in the United States, 50,000 cases. So that's out of like hundreds of millions of people, and a few thousand deaths. So based on a few thousand deaths for a non-specific disease from a cause that we don't identify, that we can't identify, from that we get to where we are now, which is every country has to be certified as being polio free by doing epidemiological research where they look for acute flaccid paralysis. You're not going to believe this. I mean, the stupidity is hard to fathom, and it's all in scientific papers and in the WHO and in the European Union and in the United States. All of the CDC and all of the public health agencies, they have these things. If one child has polio, all children are in danger.
Unbelievable.
Polio never affected anybody. And that's what they're doing now. And so now they're spending billions and billions of dollars to make sure that they're continuing to vaccinate the entire world constantly for polio, a disease that that is undefined from a cause that we don't know, using a vaccine we don't even know what it's targeting.
Do you know,
that's polio.
that's amazing breakdown, Debbie. Seriously. And what you've reminded me is that one of the things I realized as a surgeon and studying going for medicine was the incredible capacity for medics and scientists to conjure up nothing.
Yes.
So like conjure up something out of nothing. Like literally making mountains out of molehills. But in such a eloquent, flowery language that builds this house of cards, this very impressive world that they conjure up. But actually, if you're any good at reading between the lines, you realize it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. I remember during COVID, like reading articles and so-called scientific papers and public health policies that were, quoting the Imperial College would be quoting, for example, the WHO, and the WHO would then reference Gavi. Gavi would reference back to the WHO. And then Imperial College would be citing this as a scientific reference. And all it was an opinion by the WHO with massive conflicts of interest. All the people who wrote it were working with Gavi or being funded by Gavi or the Wellcome Trust. And the people at Gavi are being funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and this and that. And basically everybody's patting each other's back. Everybody's scratching each other's back. And then everybody's like, just referencing each other. And then they produce this document that's scientific. And it appears like it's peer reviewed. But actually, if you look at the nitty gritty, the nuts and bolts of it, it's the bullshit. It's bullshit. And so much of medicine, but turn it off now, turn it off, silent.
Yeah.
So much of the scientific research, medical papers, is built on assumptions, on flowery language, conflicts of interest, and you can find a medical paper or a research paper to basically back any position that you have. So if you believe in this, you'll find a paper to justify it. If you don't believe in this, you'll find another paper justifying it. But it's just nonsense. But I have to give it to these scientists and these medics and so-called experts. They're really good at it. And for the lay person, they go, oh, that's a very scientific. Oh, look at all that jargon. I don't understand that. And the problem is, most people don't understand what jargon is. Every industry has its own has its own language, its own jargon. A car mechanic has jargon. The plumber has jargon. If a plumber spoke to you on their jargon, they would be like, oh, that's very impressive. All they're describing is pipes, right? It's the same with doctors and lawyers. It's not actually complicated, but by using jargon, you hide from other people the knowledge and the truth, and then you make them ignorant and make yourself look more superior and intelligent. It's a deliberate ploy. So I like to keep things very simple, and if someone explains something to me that I don't understand, I blame it on them. They haven't made it in a presentable fashion that I can understand. And either because they don't understand that information themselves, or they're deliberately withholding the information to mislead me or to dumbfound me and to give themselves this, superior air, like, look how intelligent I am. And it's like, yeah, don't give it to me. It's all nonsense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so right. And there's a mixture of a lot of things going on there. So like you said, there's the ego and there's the stupidity and there's the professional wanting to, like you said, like wanting to be professional and sound professional. And it runs the spectrum from that to the intentional misleading, and there's the money, right? So once, for instance, and this is the example that I've been researching, once polio started getting funded, it was funded by a national foundation that was created by Roosevelt and his very close advisor, who I think was a deep state person, but I haven't done enough research to prove that. But they created this national foundation, which is exactly the same as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation of today, where they poured all the money into institutions, researchers, and projects that were about polio. And so polio suddenly became what all the researchers who were doing any kind of epidemiology or virology or anything like that, then they only wanted to do polio because that's where the money is. And the same thing, it happens with all of these so-called pandemic
even
pathogens,
even climate research.
and climate research. Yeah.
So now, for example, if you want a research grant, not even in
Yeah.
the science of climate, like you're in sociology, if you somehow reference climate into it, or if you're an accountant and you reference, oh, how will this affect the economics because of climate change? Suddenly, you know what, you're getting research money for that. Like, you don't even need to be in the science to be getting money. You just need to have your research project hinting at climate change, and then you're going to get money for that. So I know this is a major corruption of academia, that there's so many actually, but one of them is the funding basis and how you have these fads and fashions. Yeah.
And so the money is a big part of it. And then what the money funds in the worst case scenarios, and this happened a lot during COVID, is not only does it fund researchers who are just in it for their careers and for their own advancement and their own ego, but they also fund people who intentionally publish things that are lies and that are misleading. So during COVID, that happened a lot. So there are a lot of studies during COVID that were intentionally misleading about things like hydroxychloroquine and, the alternative treatments. They definitely published. Then they had to retract the Surgisphere, I'm sure you know about. But the ones where they lied so blatantly that like they actually couldn't hide it. And it was so corrupt that they actually had to withdraw it. Of course, nobody reported on it, and nobody knows that it was like the biggest scandal in medical publishing history were those studies that they had to retract. But nobody knows about that. And then there were the studies where they started claiming, interestingly, that COVID causes things like heart problems in young people and, all of the things that the vaccines cause, right? They started publishing lots of papers trying to preempt that and saying that they were all caused by COVID. And those were definitely not innocent papers. I mean, I think a lot of the papers that were published and still are intentionally misleading and untruthful. And so the corruption of science, you can be innocent about it and say, oh, it's just money. And that's bad enough. That's bad enough because you can't believe any study anymore. But I think it's worse than that. I think a lot of them are actually intentionally untruthful.
I agree. I mean, a lot of the here in the UK, Imperial College, Oxford University, these people, I mean, this famous statistician modeler, whatever his name is, that professor, Neil Ferguson. I mean, he must know he's publishing a crock of shit. I mean, he was wrong about BSC. He was wrong about swine flu. He was wrong about all these other things. He's just wrong so consistently and so out of proportion, like crazy out of proportion. He is so wrong. Yet for every single time he is wrong, he gets promoted and he professionally goes up the ladder. Like, explain that to me in any other profession. You name any other person that you literally frack up, waste people's money and times, put people's lives in jeopardy or whatever, kill animals by the tens of thousands needlessly. And instead of losing your job or being, punished for or whatever, you get promoted. And now he's like this massive professor with this huge department, big budget, and he's untouchable. And you're just like, what? Explain that.
So my conclusion from that is that he was paid from the beginning to do that. Right? So there's an opposite side of the coin to the stupidity of people. And the opposite side of that coin is whenever people say to me, everybody was so stupid during COVID. Deborah Birx was stupid and Anthony Fauci was stupid and they were all stupid. They didn't understand the science and they did bad public health and it was all bad public health. When you hear people saying they're all stupid about people like Neil Ferguson, who is clearly a very smart guy and part of the and has an enormous amount of resources and institutional support behind him and was able to get to that position, then I say, no, it's not because he's stupid. He's not stupid at all. He's extremely smart. And Anthony Fauci is one of the smartest people during COVID. He's not stupid. Deborah Birx is not stupid. None of them are stupid. They are intentionally, they are smarter than you because they're making you think that they're stupid. And that's a trick. That's a trick that they're playing. And you have to be smart to play that trick on the entire world and to make the entire world think, well, maybe they were just misled. Maybe mistakes were made. Maybe they were just stupid. No, they're extremely smart, clever, conniving, insidious. And we actually have to we have to take them very seriously. So I take people like Neil Ferguson very seriously. He's a very, very dangerous person.
And yeah, I can't wait to have you back, honestly. Folks, if you've enjoyed this conversation, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. This podcast survives because of listeners like you. If you want to hear the second half of this podcast, then please consider becoming a paid subscriber to continue supporting independent conversations. And if you want personalized support for your own health or those of your loved ones, then book a consultation. It's available at docmalik.com. Thanks for being part of this journey. I, Ahmed Malik, am a private civilian protected by the Geneva Convention. My Substack, social media posts and podcasts are my personal experiences, observations and opinions. This information is for educational purposes only. Although I am a doctor, I am not your doctor and I am not providing medical or legal advice to you or to the wider public. I am not licensed or registered with the GMC or any other licensing board. The responsibility for the interpretation, due diligence and use of the information from my Substack and my podcast lies with you, the viewer and or listener. Please do your research and use your discernment. It is not my intention to harass, intimidate, offend, defame, conspire, blackmail, coerce, or cause anxiety, alarm or distress to any man or woman, and the information presented here is done so with peaceful and honourable intentions. Enjoy, folks.